Hey, welcome back everybody to Dad's Let's Cook Something. I'm your home chef Brendan, per usual. So this recipe that I am going to make, some of it I've made before. There's a part of it that I haven't made before. In this case, it's the sauce, but I've been craving a red pepper sauce for some reason. So I figured it would go well with this dish. So I'm planning on doing a crispy skinned salmon, so a pan-seared salmon that's just a regular pan, and then there's going to be a turmeric rice. That's really nice. I've made it a bunch of times before, and it's really easy. It tastes really good. The ingredients are very simple. And that's going to get, once the rice cooks, and to kind of finish off the cook as it's steaming, as it's kind of coming up to the final product, that rice, should come out so nice and fluffy. But on top of the rice, there's going to be a bed of mustard greens that's going to steam out as it's cooking. So get some vegetables in, mustard greens. You could put kale. That's another one. Kale's a little harsh. I think unless it's like actually sauteed, it just kind of has a really earthy taste to it, which is not a bad thing, but it's just not my favorite vegetable. So mustard greens, I think, are a little bit more evened out in terms of flavor, and it won't be so aggressive. And then we're gonna finish it off with a mustard sauce, or I'm sorry, a red pepper sauce, not a mustard sauce, and just some cut up cilantro on top as a garnish for everything. So salmon, it's a lot like chicken in the sense that salmon can really soak in a lot of different flavors, and it won't ruin the fish itself. Like, it really holds well to a lot of different seasonings and marinades. So I'm gonna kind of keep this one kind of Mediterranean. So za'atar is a seasoning that I will use again, but I will obviously post the recipe and everything below. But that's kind of my plan. So kind of a Mediterranean, well-seasoned salmon, some turmeric rice that's going to have some vegetables in it, and a couple of other things that kind of spruce it up. And then the red pepper sauce will just kind of just bring everything together. So this dish shouldn't have too much heat to it, but there will be, just a different component in regards to the sauce. It'll be some red pepper, some heavy whipping cream, and just some other little spices. So the sauce will be very simple. And yeah, I'm hoping this all comes out together, because like I said, I've done the salmon, I've done the rice before, and yeah, that's just kind of what I have in my head that I think will taste pretty good. So today is Tuesday, just day after Memorial Day, so I'm going to do the rice and the salmon tomorrow. But today I kind of wanted to do a two-parter, just with kind of doing this step-by-step process with making the sauce itself. Sauce will have a day to sit to kind of do its thing. So when we go to eat tomorrow, when everything's completed, the sauce will have had a lot of time to just develop a lot of flavor. As I've mentioned multiple times before, all these recipes that I've done, there's been components that I have done a day or two or even 3 days ahead of time. So like the pickled onions, the garlic aioli, the harissa paste, in this case with this red pepper sauce, just because it's going to make my life easier. And with my days at home with my baby, it's Tuesdays and Wednesdays. All these videos I've done while she's been able to take a nap. I understand every kid's different when it comes to sleep. My daughter, for the most part, she sleeps great, but then there's days where she doesn't. So I always plan for the worst. So I try to kind of tackle these meals as if she's gonna wake up and I have to go attend to her. Because it's not like she's old enough where she can help me around the house, and she's not old enough where she can really fully be on her own. So if I can compartmentalize each dish, take care of some things a day or two ahead of time just to make my life easier, for leftovers, just for the overall prep of everything, that's what I'm going to continue to do. So it's like right now, like I'm smoking some ribs because that's going to be some leftovers for my lunch and everything like that. So I'm just trying to visualize the day and how I want it to go, and also just try to mix in just kind of the everyday kind of damage control with cleaning the house and all that stuff. So that's my recommendation. You can knock it out all in one sitting. That's on you, but this is just a routine and a schedule that I'm just trying to kind of stick by because it seems to work. So, but stay tuned for more clips with the sauce. I'll just show how I'm going to make this. It's really, really simple, and then we'll go from there and finish the rest tomorrow. All right, so first things first, what we're going to do is we're going to get an entire jar of roasted red bell peppers. It's about 16 ounces. So you're going to use the entire jar and maybe, at most, maybe 2 tablespoons of the juice that's inside there. So you'll probably have maybe close to a 1/4 cup or so left over, maybe slightly less, maybe about 1/8 cup. But what we're going to do is I already got these bad boys in the blender. So I'm going to puree these as smooth as possible. So as smooth as I can. Since we are using roasted red peppers, you could roast your own in the oven and get a nice char on them. You can grill them. You know, if you got a nice Weber grill or something, you can always do it that way. But since I'm just trying to save time for now, I'm just going to buy an already roasted red bell pepper. But you know, if you kind of want to keep it more fresh and kind of get some more smokiness to the actual pepper itself, you could easily do it on your own. All right, so this is pretty smooth now. So I would say, consistency wise, if you're able to make it kind of like a pizza sauce, give or take, if that's how you want to think about it, if that's easier, that's what I would go for. But yeah, so it's not super chunky. You're probably going to get chunks like this in here, these black specks, but that's just because of the roast. So when you roast red peppers, they'll turn black, especially, you know, once you have them over the fire. They're going to turn black. It's just what they do. They blister, and that's just what happens. But then usually you'll steam them afterwards, and then you scrape off the black, you know, burnt stuff, you know, as much as you can. There's going to be some that you're just not going to get, so that's where this comes from. So even the jarred up product of this, they're still going through that process. They're just adding just different preservatives to keep it in the jar. But so if you see this stuff, do not be alarmed. It's totally normal. All right, we're going to continue with this. I'm going to start off with some butter. Oop. I've had this pan heating up a little bit, so as you can see, it's starting to brown. So I'm just going to take this off the heat for now, and then I'm going to do a little trick and show you in case this happens. All right, so if your butter starts to burn a little bit, it's not the end of the world. And one thing to stop your butter from burning too fast is just add a little bit of oil. Oil is very much a protective barrier for your butter. All right, so I took that pureed red pepper sauce, poured it in the pan. So since my garlic was cooking a little bit fast, that was just an error on my end. But it'll still be fine. I caught it in time, and there should still be plenty of flavor, and it shouldn't taste burnt or anything. So we're just going to let this incorporate with the garlic, and then I will add a few more ingredients to this in a bit. So, but it should look nice and smooth like that. And then those bubbles, we're just going to wait for this to kind of start bubbling a little bit more before adding a few more things. We're going to add some basil leaves, and then it's inside of my mill, but we're just going to add some pepper. You don't have to go too heavy on this. Even if you just do a few teaspoons, that's okay, because like always, once you make a sauce, before you serve it, taste it. Taste it and see what seasoning it needs. Basil, in this case, it's not something that you need to add too much of. So I'm just going to kind of add a little bit to get it incorporated. So, and this is that's probably about a teaspoon. So basil's pretty strong. It'll taste really, really easy. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the pepper right now. All right, so I just added some pepper, maybe a few teaspoons at most, not a ton, because like I said, I'm gonna taste it before I go to serve and just make sure that it's right. And it's gonna be sitting a day or so, so everything's gonna get incorporated and it should kind of marry as the night goes on. So it shouldn't need too much seasoning. The roasted red peppers that are in the jar, because of the liquid that it's in, like anything that's inside of a jar, it's going to act as a preservative. And you need salt to preserve food most of the time. So there should be enough saltiness and enough acidity in this where I don't have to really add a lot of salt. But once you saute your garlic and your butter, you pour in your sauce mixture, you add your pepper and your basil. Just have your stove relatively low, so that way this doesn't cook too fast. It's gonna definitely become thicker, but you don't want it to get so thick so fast that it's gonna seize up on you and it's not gonna be right. So we want to give this some time to cook. So this will be about a 15 minute process, give or take, but just keep an eye on it. If it's starting to look like it's burning, you don't have to spend so much time on it. Everybody's stove is different. I cook on electric, unfortunately, so my electric stove is just going to be different than a gas stove, but just keep an eye on it. But about 10 minutes or so for it to come together. And then after 10 minutes or so, we're going to add some cream, and that's what's going to smoothen it out for us. All right, so my sauce was thickening up, and once it got a little chunky, so before you add the cream, if you kind of spread your sauce this way before any cream is introduced, how you're seeing the pan here. So this is obviously really thick because of the cream, so the parting of the Red Sea here is not going to be as noticeable. But when it stops doing that with your pan, with the initial puree of the red peppers, that's when it's time to add the sauce. So I added about a half cup of heavy whipping cream, and so it almost looks like a vodka sauce now. But I'm just going to keep stirring this. I'm going to let this heat through, and just so that way the initial red peppers can mesh with the cream here. And then we're going to be done. And then I might give it an initial taste just to see where I'm at. And then I will give it a taste tomorrow before we actually go to serve it with our dish. But yeah, very, very, very simple dish. That didn't take too long. I've been probably going at this for about 20 minutes, and that saves me 20 minutes for tomorrow. All right, we're back at it with the pan-seared salmon, creamy turmeric rice with mustard greens. So it's a vegetable of choice today. And then we're going to add the roasted red pepper sauce that we made yesterday. So my daughter right now is not overly cooperative. She's kind of having a rough morning. So I'm going to take care of the rice now. And then later on, that's when I'm going to do the filming of the fish. The fish is going to take me the least amount of time, so that's why I'm going to wait. The rice isn't going to take crazy long, but the preparation for it's going to be a little bit longer. So I'm going to try to strategize my day accordingly. I was just going to bang all this out later, but rice will hold up just fine. It's not like you can't have leftovers of rice. We're just not going to eat it fresh, but this dish is still going to be awesome, so it won't be a huge deal. So what we're going to do first is I'm letting my pot heat up right now. Instead of rinsing or just doing a thorough wash on the rice, we're going to brown it off. So I'm going to brown it off with a little bit of butter, a little bit of olive oil so it doesn't burn. And then from there, we're going to flavor the rice. So I've already cut up some shallots. It'll be in the description below. But I've cut up some shallots. I'm going to add some minced garlic to it. I'm going to grate some fresh ginger into it. And then it's going to get some turmeric. And turmeric's going to give it that really beautiful yellow golden color. And then a little bit of salt. And then from there, it'll be boiled off with vegetable stock as opposed to chicken stock. You can use chicken stock, but all I have right now are those chicken bouillons where you can make your own stock. Those get a little bit salty though. So I use it pretty regularly, but for this rice, I don't want it to be overly salty. I want to be able to control the salt content. So I'm going to add salt as needed, and before I serve it, I'm going to taste it, of course, and then I'm going to see how much salt that I need. And I have a whole thing of vegetable stock that's been in my fridge for a little bit. It's so good. It's not expired or anything, but I'm going to use up the rest of the vegetable stock that I have and then control the salt content on my own. So that's how I'm going to do it today. You can use chicken stock. It'll be the same measurements for either one. It's not really going to matter. And then once the water comes to a boil or your liquid comes to a boil, that's when you're going to throw on top your mustard greens. Don't stir it though, just let it sit, because once you bring it to a boil, you're going to bring down your heat. You're going to top it off with your lid, and then you're going to let your vegetables steam essentially while the lid is on. So I'm going to kind of just show step-by-step process just of flavoring the rice, and then once it comes to a boil, I'll film that as well. But really easy. So you're just making rice, but you're just adding some different flavors and some different aromatics to it. All right, so I have my rice that's in here. So I already added my shallots. I added my minced garlic. I've added my ginger. I've added my chili flakes. And it's been browning off with some butter and a little bit of olive oil just so it doesn't burn. For about a few minutes now. This process doesn't need to be overly long. And remember, everybody's heat control is different with an electric stove versus a gas stove. So I'm not trying to overly cook this because I don't want it to burn. I don't want to have burnt rice in there. Those little black marks, those are just chili flakes, so it's not burning. But I will put step-by-step process of just how to add all your aromatics and your flavoring. But right now I'm going to go ahead and just add the liquid once I feel like I have it browned off where I want it. Alright, so as we can see, it's starting to come to a boil now. So what I'm going to do is get a better angle. These are my mustard greens. So I'm probably going to add about half of this bag, because as we know, when we cook down greens, it won't be as big, because it's hard to measure out 2 or 3 cups of your greens, because every green is going to weigh and be a different size. So I'm just going to add about half of this, and we're going to see how this comes out later. So now I have the greens on, and I'm just going to turn down the stove to the lowest possible setting, and we're going to let this steam, and I'm going to put the lid on. And it should be about 10 or so minutes. So I'm going to come back at 8:52, and then I'm going to check it out. And then I'm going to taste the rice. If it needs more time, I'll put the lid on, let it steam a little bit more. And then from there, I'll know exactly how much salt and all that I need. But make sure you do that to your taste, because my taste will be different than yours. All right, so before I forget, because this step is important. So we've done about 10 or so minutes with the rice covered on a very low heat, but we're gonna let this continue to steam. And you know, any pot, any pan that you have, it's designed to hold heat, right? So we're not gonna keep the heat on entirely, but it's still gonna steam. Like, you can still see steam coming out of there. So turn the heat off after 10 or so minutes, and then we're just gonna continue to let this steam. But don't keep checking it. Don't keep trying to open it up to see what's going on. Like right now, it's a little out of your control, but we have to let the heat and everything dictate how this rice is going to turn out. So Yeah, so just rule of thumb, just got to be patient with rice at times. It's very easy to cook, but it's also very, very easy to mess up. All right. So that's a finished product. So you can see the greens really wilted down. Even if I threw in that whole bag in there, it honestly wouldn't be that bad. But because of the amount of greens that are in there, if you were to do the whole thing, you probably just run the risk of accidentally burning the rice because it's going to take longer for everything to steam. So I think half a bag was probably adequate. I probably did a little bit more. It's hard to measure greens. It's one thing if you're cutting up herbs like parsley and you can measure out a fourth of a cup. But when they say, certain ingredients are like, 2 cups of mustard greens, I mean, mustard greens are pretty long. So, I've made this recipe enough where I have an idea of just what I need to put in there, but that's what it should look like. So it's a really, really aromatic, it's a really nice looking rice. It looks beautiful on a plate. I added probably a tablespoon of kosher salt in the beginning, and then I probably added like another tablespoon of kosher salt at the end. So right when I pulled it out, I mixed all the greens together, made sure everything was incorporated. I gave it a taste, just needed a little bit of salt. But that's because I didn't use chicken stock. Chicken stock has a decent amount of sodium in it. You can buy a reduced sodium stock also. But for this, like I said, I had vegetable stock that I needed to use before it expired, which is totally fine. But from there, I had to be the one to control the salt content. But it's really, really good. It's nice and creamy. The coconut milk adds like a good amount of flavor to this. You don't have to add coconut milk if you don't want. I'll make sure to put that in the description that it is optional. But if you haven't tried it in terms of just coconut milk, like if you're not well versed in like the curry world, like with Thai food where they use coconut milk and coconut fat for those types of dishes, it really, really makes a difference. And I think this is really going to go well with that roasted red pepper sauce that we made. So yeah, hopefully this comes out well for you. And this will heat up really easy since it's not such a hard rice, like because of the coconut milk really gives it a lot of fluffiness. So when you go to microwave this, there's going to be plenty of moisture in there and it's going to heat up just fine. So, but when we come back, I'm going to cook the salmon. So I want to kind of have that as fresh as possible just for my dinner tonight with my wife. But we'll go over the steps on how to make a pan-seared salmon. All right, so my little sous chef is in the back. Say hi, Harley. Yeah, say hello. I got the pan heating up right now, but I'm about to do the salmon. So the reason why I'm showing the salmon is every protein gives you signs of when it's going to be ready to flip, whether it's done or the muscle, the protein, the meat, whatever. It's going to give you something. In this case, salmon. So you see how there's different layers in the salmon. So I want you guys to kind of think of the salmon as like a gas meter. So if you're looking at your gas meter in your car and you're trying to see how full of gas you are or how low you are, the salmon does the same thing. So as it cooks, it's going to go from the bottom up and it's going to change color. So if you see like salmon colored t-shirts, it's kind of like, it's not orange, but it's not pink. That's because the salmon changes color when it cooks. So that's basically where that vernacular comes from, or that phrasing. Handle your salmon a little bit more delicately than I did. So that's kind of why it's falling apart there. That's on me. It'll still cook fine. But yeah, so as it's cooking, you're going to do skin side down. I'll show you guys once it's done because I did score the skin, which basically just means I made like a 1/2 inch incision. I did 2 of them in the salmon, and that's going to stop it from buckling because whenever it hits the pan, it's going to kind of want to lift up. So scoring the skin will not only allow the heat to penetrate the fish and it'll cook evenly, it'll stop it from buckling up. But if you don't do that, if your knives aren't sharp enough to do that, just when you stick it on the pan, just hold it. Just gently hold it so that way the skin doesn't retract. Hold it for about 10 seconds or so. But make sure your pan's at a nice heat. It doesn't have to be incredibly hot, maybe just below medium heat. And you really want to let the pan just slowly bring the salmon up to temperature. Once you get to about maybe 75-80% of the salmon cooked, give it a flip, and it's just a few minutes. So this should really be like a 10-minute process, give or take. So I'm going to try and get a good view of the salmon here. There we go. So you can already see after just a couple minutes, the salmon's already starting to change color. So you can see on this side, you can see some of that raw salmon color there, but now that it's been introduced to some heat, it's already changing color. So a salmon of this thickness should really only be a few minutes. If it's like a honkin' piece of salmon, you know, I think most professional kitchens, they can probably get a piece of salmon done in like 8 to 10 minutes, give or take. So this might be half of that time. But just don't rush it. Let the pan do the work and let that skin get crispy. Alright, so I got the skin where I want it, so I'm going to go ahead and just finish it off. Belly side down, that's nice and seasoned. I will put the seasonings in the description below. And just finish it off. And then once you're done, always let your meat rest. In this case, let your salmon rest. Alright, that's the finished product. And I just gave it a quick squeeze of lemon at the end. I topped off the salmon just with a little bit of kosher salt. I don't have any flaky salt. That's the fancy stuff. But yeah, it looks good, smells good. I'm gonna give it a taste. That sauce is pretty good. It's a lot like pizza sauce. I'm gonna get a whole bite here with the salmon and the rice. How can that be bad? It's creamy, it's lemony, it's fresh because of the cilantro. The coconut milk, it doesn't give it so much coconut flavor. It just gives it a lot of fat. So the rice just has a lot more to it. It's not just boiled grains of rice with water. So definitely flavors it up and gives it a little bit of sweetness, but I wouldn't say it tastes like straight coconut. So I think that's where a lot of people get freaked out. But yeah, the rice is awesome. This is like one of my favorite ways to prepare rice. The sauce is actually, it's nice. But I think what I would do differently is I wouldn't add so much heavy cream. So I use about half a cup. I probably would use about a quarter cup. But if you choose to not put coconut milk in the rice, and if you just did cream in the sauce, it could balance out. But in this case, I have two creamy things that might be competing against one another. But that's where the lemon kind of comes into play. The lemon kind of helps to cut that out. Acidity is always key. But yeah, I love salmon. Salmon's so easy to cook. Even with my baby awake, I was able to get this done. It's nice and moist. It blends in with the sauce really well. Salmon and lemon is always a good pairing, so if you have lemon, definitely use it for this dish to kind of round out everything. And I love za'atar seasoning. I love Mediterranean flavors. They're just very fresh and it tastes healthy. It doesn't taste, like overly greasy American food. I love it. It's good. One thing about the salmon that I can't do by myself filming because I don't have the proper setup is once you give it a flip, you want to be able to, you want to baste it with some butter. So maybe I'll do a video on that later on. But before I forget, before I finish the salmon, you can see that there's some ridges in the salmon. That's what I mean by scoring it. So get a knife, get it as sharp as you can. Do your best to be delicate with the fish and just kind of cut an incision about 1/2 inch. And that's it. In this case, because this piece of salmon wasn't very big, I just did 2 incisions. So it should keep the salmon nice and flat. It's okay to still give it a little push once you put it on the pan. Don't have your pan overly hot because fish skin will burn very quickly. So low-ish going towards medium heat is enough. You don't need to sear it and you know, get a hard sear like a steak. You know, you want to treat the skin with a little bit more respect. If you don't like the skin, if you want to just bake the salmon, you could do that too. I like the crispy skin though. It just adds a different textural component to it. What other things you can do with this? You can add harissa to this. We made harissa before, harissa salmon. That's definitely a thing. I've seen that before. And I can see that going very well versus this roasted red pepper sauce. So salmon's very much a blank canvas. So I'm gonna get back to eating this. I'm gonna get back to my kid because she's actually awake for during this filming. But thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoy the recipe. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what's going on. Thank you.